Welcome to Silent Screams, where darkness, whispers, and terror await you. Are you ready to confront your fears? Story 1: The Midnight Hiker. In the quiet town of Ravenswood, nestled between dense forests and a winding mountain trail, there existed an urban legend that few dared to repeat aloud. It was said that if you ventured onto the old Ridgeway Trail after midnight, you might encounter the Midnight Hiker, a ghostly figure that walked endlessly, searching for something, or someone. Locals claimed that the hiker was a restless spirit, doomed to wander after a fatal accident that occurred decades ago. But no one seemed to know the full story. The tales were always fragmentary, shifting with the teller's imagination. Some said the hiker was a young man who had fallen to his death. Others whispered of a murderer who had used the trail to bury his victims. Whatever the truth, the legend had kept most residents far away from the trail after dark. Except for Jason. Jason was a skeptic. The kind of guy who thought every ghost story was a fabrication meant to scare kids or sell Halloween decorations. He loved challenging the town's old legends, often posting videos online debunking them. For him, the Midnight Hiker was just another tale to expose. Armed with a flashlight, a camera, and a deep sense of overconfidence, Jason decided to hike the Ridgeway Trail at exactly midnight. The night air was crisp, and the forest was unnervingly quiet as Jason stepped onto the trail. His flashlight cut a narrow path through the darkness, illuminating only the immediate area ahead. The towering trees seemed to close in around him, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. Jason kept his camera rolling, narrating as he walked. This is Ridgeway Trail, where countless locals claim to have seen the Midnight Hiker. Spoiler alert, they won't. Ghosts aren't real, folks. The trail was uneventful for the first half hour. Jason chuckled to himself, confident that he'd have yet another boring video to upload. But then, the air changed. It was subtle at first, a shift in the wind, a sudden drop in temperature. Jason's breath fogged in front of him, and a faint sound reached his ears. Crunch. Crunch. Footsteps. He stopped, swinging his flashlight around. Hello? Anyone there? His voice sounded too loud, even to himself, bouncing off the trees and fading into the void. No response. Jason resumed walking, chalking the sound up to an animal or his imagination. But the footsteps continued, keeping pace with him. Every time he stopped, they stopped. He laughed nervously into the camera. Okay. Maybe someone's out here messing with me. Nice try. But you're not scaring me. As the trail curved into a clearing, Jason's flashlight beam fell on something ahead, a figure standing perfectly still in the middle of the path. It was a man wearing a tattered jacket and hiking boots, his back to Jason. The man didn't move, didn't seem to notice the flashlight shining on him. Hey! Jason called out. You lost or something? The figure remained silent. Jason hesitated but forced himself to step closer. I'm just filming a video. Didn't mean to startle you. Are you okay? The man turned slowly, and Jason's breath caught in his throat. The hiker's face was pale and hollow, his eyes sunken and lifeless. Blood stained his shirt, soaking through the fabric in dark patches. Help me, the man whispered, his voice barely audible. Jason froze. His mind raced with rationalizations. It had to be a prank, maybe someone had set this up to scare him. But as he stood there, the air grew heavier, suffocating. and the figure began to move. Not walking, gliding. Jason stumbled backward, tripping over a root. He scrambled to his feet and ran, abandoning any pretense of bravery. Behind him, the sound of footsteps grew louder, impossibly fast. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the hiker chasing him, now moving with inhuman speed. The trail twisted and turned, but Jason could barely see where he was going. Branches clawed at his face, and the flashlight slipped from his grip, plunging him into darkness. A sharp pain erupted in his ankle as he tripped again, this time landing hard on the rocky ground. His camera skidded away. The screen cracked but still recording. Jason fumbled for his phone, hands trembling. He dialed 911. His voice a panicked whisper. "Please. I'm on Ridgeway Trail. Someone is after me. I don't know." The line went dead. Jason's heart pounded as he turned his head. The hiker was standing over him now, his hollow eyes staring down. "You shouldn't have come here," the hiker said, his voice echoing unnaturally. Jason screamed as the figure reached for him, cold hands gripping his shoulders. The search party found Jason's camera 2 days later, lying in the middle of the trail. There was no sign of Jason himself. When the police reviewed the footage, they saw Jason narrating his hike, heard the footsteps, and watched as he encountered the figure. The final moments were a chaotic blur, Jason running, falling, and screaming. But the last frame sent chills down the spines of everyone who watched it. The camera, lying on the ground, captured the hiker standing over Jason. For a brief moment, the hiker looked directly into the lens, his lifeless eyes seemingly aware of the recording. Then, he turned and vanished into the forest. Ravenswood's urban legend was no longer just a story. It was a warning. Story 2, The Whisper of Hollow Bridge. Every town has its share of urban legends. Some are amusing, like the tales of a bottomless lake or the perpetually closed candy shop that supposedly holds dark secrets. But others carry a weight that transcends mere stories, laced with warnings from those who claim to have lived through their horrors. In the small town of Greyburn, nestled between rolling hills and dense woods, there was one such legend, the Hollow Bridge. It was said that anyone who crossed the bridge at midnight and whispered their darkest secret into the mist would awaken a curse. Locals warned of inexplicable disappearances, fractured minds, and even death. For most, it was just a ghost story. For me, it was the beginning of a nightmare. I didn't believe the stories, not until I crossed the bridge. It all started as a stupid dare. It was late October, and my friends and I were gathered around a bonfire in the woods. The crisp air carried the scent of burning wood and the faint rustle of leaves. Stories flowed freely, fueled by cheap beer and teenage bravado. "You're all cowards," sneered Logan, the ringleader of our little group. His blonde hair caught the firelight, making him look like some mischievous sprite. "I bet none of you have the guts to cross the Hollow Bridge." "Why would we?" Emma retorted, her voice tinged with annoyance. "That place is cursed. People disappear there. That's just a load of crap to keep kids from messing around." Logan scoffed. "It's just an old bridge. Nothing more." I watched as he turned to me, a sly grin spreading across his face. "How about it, Jack? You up for it? Or are you scared too?" My pride prickled. I hated being called a coward, especially by Logan. "Fine," I said, feigning nonchalance. I'll do it. The hollow bridge was a rickety structure spanning a shallow, murky creek at the edge of town. It was ancient, its wooden planks warped and splintered with age. By the time we arrived, the air was heavy with an unnatural chill, and the moon hung low, casting long shadows through the surrounding trees. "Remember," Logan said, his voice dripping with mock seriousness. "You have to whisper your deepest, darkest secret into the mist at exactly midnight. Otherwise, it doesn't count." I rolled my eyes but played along. As the clock struck midnight, I stood at the center of the bridge. The creek below seemed impossibly still, its surface reflecting the moonlight like a sheet of glass. Taking a deep breath, I leaned over the railing and whispered a secret I had buried for years. I wished my brother had died instead of my dad. The words felt like acid on my tongue. The mist swallowed them greedily, dissipating into the night. At first, nothing happened. Then, a faint sound reached my ears, a soft, hollow whisper, like wind passing through an empty corridor. It sent shivers down my spine. I turned to my friends, but they were laughing and joking, oblivious to the sound. The days that followed felt wrong. It started with small things. Shadows seemed to stretch toward me in ways they shouldn't. At night, I'd hear faint whispers just outside my bedroom window, though no one was there. Then came the dreams. Every night, I found myself back on the bridge, standing in the suffocating mist. A figure would emerge, a tall, skeletal man with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through me. He never spoke, but his presence was suffocating, his gaze filled with malice. When I woke, the whispers would follow me, growing louder each day. My friends noticed the changes. Emma asked if I was feeling all right, her concern genuine. But Logan just laughed. "Guess the ghost of the bridge finally got you." Huh. By the end of the week, I was barely sleeping. The figure from my dreams began appearing in the corners of my vision during the day. Always watching. Always waiting. It wasn't just me. Emma disappeared first. One moment, she was walking home from school. And the next, she was gone. Her parents plastered the town with missing posters, but no one could explain what happened. Then Logan started acting strange. His bravado vanished, replaced by a nervous paranoia. He muttered to himself constantly, his eyes darting around as if he was being watched. One night, he showed up at my house, pale and trembling. "It's the bridge," he whispered. "We shouldn't have gone there. It's coming for us." Before I could respond, he bolted into the night. The next morning, they found him in the creek beneath the bridge, his body twisted and broken. I knew I was next. Desperation drove me back to the hollow bridge. I needed answers. Some way to stop the curse. The night was eerily silent as I stood at the center of the bridge, clutching a flashlight. "Show yourself," I shouted into the mist. "What do you want from me?" The whispers grew louder, converging into a single, guttural voice. "Your secret," was heard. The figure appeared, more solid than ever. His hollow eyes glowed faintly as he pointed a bony finger at me. "You wished for death," he rasped. "Now, it follows you." I fell to my knees, begging for mercy. But the figure only laughed, a sound that echoed with centuries of pain and malice. "The curse cannot be undone. Your guilt binds you to me." The mist enveloped me, cold and suffocating. I screamed. But no sound escaped. They found me the next morning, unconscious on the bridge. My hair had turned stark white, and my eyes carried the hollow look of someone who had seen too much. I tried to warn others, to tell them to stay away from the hollow bridge. But the legend persisted, whispered in hushed tones among the townsfolk. And still, some dared to test it, thinking it was just a story. They don't understand. The hollow bridge isn't just cursed, it's hungry. And secrets are its favorite feast. Story 3, The Vanishing Stairwell. New York City is no stranger to legends. Among the urban canyons of towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, stories circulate, some so bizarre that they linger long after the last subway train has roared past. One such tale is that of the Vanishing Stairwell, a ghostly remnant of the city's shadowy past that appears only to those lost or desperate. It's said to exist in an old, derelict building in Lower Manhattan. The building, known as Harwick Tower, was once a bustling office block in the 1930s, until a series of gruesome deaths led to its abandonment. Stories of whispers, ghostly apparitions, and inexplicable cold spots surrounded it. Over the decades, the stairwell became a legend, an urban labyrinth that pulled people in and never let them out. But legends, as Claire discovered, are often based on truths too dark to be buried. Claire, a 23-year-old journalism student, didn't believe in ghost stories. She thrived on disproving them, turning whispers into click-worthy headlines. When her best friend, Ethan, dared her to investigate the story of Harwick Tower, she jumped at the chance. Claire, Ethan warned, this isn't like the other places you've written about. People go missing there. It's not just some spooky abandoned building. Claire laughed it off, brushing aside his concern. With her digital recorder, camera, and flashlight, she headed to Harwick Tower at dusk. The building loomed over her like a decaying monolith. Its windows were dark and jagged, like the empty sockets of a skull. She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing on the cracked marble floor. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, carrying a faint metallic scent. At first, she found nothing unusual, just the remnants of a forgotten past, rusted desks, peeling wallpaper, and stacks of crumbling papers. But then, she heard it, a faint whisper. "Help me." Claire spun around, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The voice had come from the far end of the hallway. She hesitated, her instinct screaming to leave. But her curiosity overruled her fear. She followed the sound. The hallway seemed to stretch longer with each step, as if the building itself was shifting. Finally, she reached a door labeled Stairwell in faded letters. The metal handle was icy cold, and when she pushed it open, a gust of frigid air rushed past her. The stairwell was unlike anything she'd ever seen. The steps spiraled downward endlessly, their edges crumbling into shadows. The walls were etched with symbols, strange, looping patterns that seemed to writhe under her flashlight. And then there were the whispers, growing louder as she descended. "They took me. Don't leave. It's hungry." Claire's heart raced. She tried to rationalize it, wind through the cracks. Echoes, but the voices were too distinct, too desperate. She turned to leave, but the door she had entered through was gone. In its place was solid brick. Panic set in. Claire's breathing quickened as she pounded on the wall, screaming for help. The whispers intensified, mocking her fear. With no other choice, she began descending the stairwell. The further she went, the colder it became. The air grew thick, making it hard to breathe. Her flashlight began to flicker, casting strange, shifting shadows. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse, as if alive. She lost all sense of time. Minutes? Hours? Days? It didn't matter. The stairwell was endless, and her legs ached from the constant descent. Hunger and exhaustion gnawed at her. But something deeper, a primal fear, kept her moving. Then she saw it, a figure standing in the shadows. It was barely human. Its body elongated and twisted. Its face was featureless, save for two glowing eyes that burned like embers. It didn't move, but its presence was suffocating. Claire froze, unable to look away as it raised a long, bony finger, pointing further down the stairs. "You can't stop," it rasped. "Not now." By the time Claire reached the bottom, she was barely conscious. The stairs opened into a vast, cavernous room lit by a sickly green glow. In the center was a pit, and from its depths came a sound, a deep, guttural growl that shook the walls. Around the pit stood the missing. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow, their bodies gaunt and broken. They whispered in unison, their voices blending into a haunting chant. "Feed it. Feed it. Feed it." Claire realized too late that she was not meant to leave. The stairwell wasn't just a place, it was a trap. A feeding ground for whatever lurked in the darkness below. She tried to run, but the figures closed in, their icy hands dragging her toward the pit. Her screams echoed through the void as the ground gave way, and she fell into the maw of the beast. Weeks later, Ethan stood outside Harwick Tower, staring at the police barricade. Claire's belongings had been found scattered near the building, but of her, there was no trace. "She's not the first," an officer said, shaking his head. "People have been disappearing in that place for decades. It's cursed." Ethan turned away, clutching Claire's camera. When he played back the footage, his blood ran cold. The final clip showed her staring into the lens, tears streaming down her face. "Don't come looking for me," she whispered. "It won't let you leave." As the video ended, Ethan heard it, a faint, chilling whisper coming from the camera. "Help me."